Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our ESG, new paradigm of the development of the financial market development within the 10th Congress of Financiers of Kazakhstan. The agency of the Republic of Kazakhstan on financial market regulation and International Finance Corporation and our partners, International Finance Corporation, IFC Association of Financiers of Kazakhstan UN Environment Program. Please let me emphasize our general sponsors, NJSC, Halyk Bank, and Jasan Bank, and also other sponsors, Skybridge Invest and Ford Bank. We would like to express our gratitude, and we're happy to have long-term cooperation and collaboration with our partners. Today, we plan to discuss the global trends of financing, sustainable regulations and approaches to the responsible investing, the real cases of business transformation and ESG strategies forming, and the leading practice in ESG disclosure and available tools of green financing and other actual topic. Of course, these very complicated situation in the world economy, implementing ESG principles, it is one of the most discussed trends. And our conference is held during the days when the UN conference on climate change takes place in Egypt, starting on the 7th up to 18th of November. And today, the participants of the conference, they mention the necessity of carbon footprint reduction because of the temperature decrease more than 1.5 degrees. And even today, we really need to finance for the developing countries and to finance the transformation of the economy to decrease the emissions. And of course, financial sector is not left behind. And to support this direction to achieve the ESG of UNO, the global financial market development has its contribution to financial flows standardization on ESG disclosure, implementing of the practice of the responsible investment. Within the frameworks of today's conference, the plenary session is devoted ESG, the agenda of the future, with the participation of financial regulations and leading international organizations. Then the event will be divided into 4 panel sessions: ESG transformation on business, the responsible investment, ESG financing, and ESG agenda in Central Asia and Kazakhstan. And at the end, we will have the workshops on promoting green finance for the SME segment and ESG disclosure on behalf of the organizer and co-organizers. Thank you so much for that you are here, and the expert opinion, your expertise will be really important for this discussion within the panel session. Please let me give the floor to Madina Abylkassymova, the chair of the Agency of the Republic of Kazakhstan for Regulation and Development of the Financial Market. Thank you so much. Good morning, distinguished colleagues and participants of this session. I would like to congratulate you on the day of the National Currency and Financiers Day. Today's event we have organized with the National Bank with the support of our international partners, International Financial Corporation, EBRD, and the UNO program on environment. Last year, together with international partners, we had large scope of work to study international standards and trends that are in the world of the financial markets. And we have realized that at this time, many regulators all over the world, they apply and implement based on the international standards. They've started implemented the specific practices to regulate the financial organizations. After realizing and understanding that these trends are supposed to be implemented in the practice at the financial market of Kazakhstan, we have done a large scope of work together with international organizations with our partners to study those international standards that are being set up. And we have identified the specific directions for our collaborative work. When we've started the implementation of international standards, we've been working tightly together with audit organizations, with rating scores organizations, with analytical centers. And we have noticed that all stakeholders, all parties are interested in this process. And I would like to welcome you all being here at the conference, all the participants, all the interested parties and stakeholders. We are happy to welcome you here. And our research organizations are happy to welcome the representatives of financial organizations. And here we have the rating agencies, audit companies, and from their point of view, from take into consideration their mandate, they have great level of contribution of ESG agenda. If we are considering these key trends that in the sustainable development in 2022, we can see that the growth of investment flows, growth into ESG funds, and according to the 2021, the investment was 3 times more than $330 billion, billions of the USD, and the volume has reached $3.5 trillion. And financial markets, we can see the strengthening and regulating disclosure and non-financial information, taking into consideration the factors of ESG. Talking about the corporate sector and private sector, the implementation of ESG policy has been strengthened, and the social element and factor. Nevertheless, positive trends at the global trend. In October report of UNO on climate change, it is mentioned that countries could speed up the green emissions to accelerate, but this efforts still it's not enough to limit the global temperature 1.5 degree by 21 to 2100. We have the summit, UNO in Sharm el Sheikh on climate change, where global leaders are trying to have their efforts combined to achieve the common goal and to reduce the impact of economy on this. Then the EU and Kazakhstan, they have MOU on strategy development and partnership on batteries and the cost of the green hydrogen. Kazakhstan is the participant of Paris Agreement, has accepted the world agenda of sustainable development in October last year. The ways of the achieving the Paris Agreement and carbon neutrality of Kazakhstan. The Republic of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, has supported the calls of UNO to reduce green gas greenhouse gas emissions. This strategy 2060 will unify the measures that must be realized by Kazakhstan to reduce the carbon footprint, take into consideration the national experience. During this year, all the stakeholders and state authorities, governmental bodies, the government of the Republic of Kazakhstan, first of all, we have been working actively in working on the strategy and developing this. The development of the strategy, it's necessary to mention that everyone was involved, the international and local partners and research organizations. The significance and importance of this strategy and its realization is emphasized by all the international institutions. The World Bank, in its research, mentioned that Kazakhstan is under the risks of climate change in 3 directions. First of all, global measures on struggling against the climate change increase the risks to support the competition of Kazakhstan as exporter of oil and gas. Second of all, Kazakhstan is one of the carbon consuming countries of Central Asia, and its economy will face great risks during the realization of its transformation. Plus, large agricultural resources are under the risks because of the feature of the climate change. And the results of this World Bank research, the refusal of decarbonization can come to the shortages in economy, to the per capita. There will be the reduction of the measures, and we need to identify the optimal balance between economical development and decarbonization of the manufacture, which will require the structural transformation of our country. Today, green economy in Kazakhstan is about 3%, and we plan to scale it up to 15% by 2030 to reduce carbon emissions and in order to soften the consequences of these, we have the quota trade on greenhouse gas emissions. It covers 43% of all emissions in the country. Plus, we have the auctions on constructing the large sites on the renewable resources. The National Economy Evaluation says that up to 2030, in order to achieve the carbon neutrality, we will need the investment 229,000 billion USD, and even more it will be required since 2031 up to 2060. That great amount of investment really requires a great participation of investments. The key role is the financing being moved to the ESG project transformation of economy of Kazakhstan based on ESG standards. What has already been done in order to invest the green financing? Last year in Kazakhstan, we have formed the legislation, appropriate legislation. We've got the new ecological code within the frameworks of which we have the taxonomy of green projects, which are devoted to increase the efficiency of usage of the natural resources, decreasing the negative impact and influence on the environment, increasing the energy efficiency, energy saving, and softening the consequences of climate change and adaptation to this. Agency itself has considered the issuing green, social, sustainable bonds and everything that is connected with the sustainable development. Since 2021, for financing in green projects in Kazakhstan, we have the listing of the projects 131 billion tenge, and then there were 3 issues of bonds, 64 billion tenge, such companies as Kigok, the DVK, and the Asian Development Bank. Also, we have created the basis at the level of laws in order to develop the market of green financing. The law on July 12th at the legislation base, we have regulated the issues of ESG obligations and turnover, which by the association ICMA, in order to exclude this greenwashing. We have considered the procedures of the mandatory of the external evaluation and verifications, and the list of which, and we have the targeted aims to allocate this investments. In financial sector, we can also see very active work of the participants of financial market in order to transfer to ESG standards, in order to stimulate and motivate the further implementation of international standards in this sphere. We have started together with our international partners active work on ESG principles implementation, especially when it comes to the activities of financial organizations. We have signed in 2022 with the International Financial Corporation and with the Eurasian Bank for Reconstruction. We have signed the agreements, and we have identified the deadline for implementation of the organizations in sphere of disclosure of non-financial information and ESG risks management. It's important to mention that the process of ESG standards implementation will step by step. It will provide time to financial organizations to get adapted to new regulatory requirements. We can see that we will have several steps. The system of ESG information disclosure, for that, agencies at the moment have prepared the guidelines has been prepared on criteria ESG disclosure, and to disclosure the information on financial information, the access of stakeholders to the information about the financial organization's impact on the environment, social sphere, and economy, and also the assessment and evaluation of ESG factors on financial indicators of financial organization itself. We have based on 5 key indicators on sustainable development, global initiative on GRI report, this Council on Standards Sustainable Development, International Council on Integrated Reporting, the Work Group on Disclosure of Financial Information Connected to the Climate, and the Council on International Standards of Sustainable Development, which has prepared the new standard of these aspects connecting to the climate change. The agency offers to have the disclosure and financial information in 3 blocks. First block, disclosure information on such elements as environment, climate, employees, the products, and financial inclusions and ethics. Within the second block, we offer to disclosure the structure and the process which a financial organization uses to provide the guidelines and management on ESG factors. This block includes the management of sustainable development, the strategy, risks management, and the key indicators indicators of efficiency. The third block includes the corporate governance issues, and it consists of information on the commitment to the practices and the activities of the directors, the rights of shareholders, and the cooperation with the stakeholders. Financial organizations will be able to use this document to prepare the publishing of the results, ESG factors, impact on its activity within the framework of annual reporting. We would like to mention at this stage the recommendations of agencies which will be voluntarily. The next step, it will be from the voluntarily optional to the mandatory on disclosure information on ESG factors. Plus, the next step, we plan to establish regulatory requirements on ESG factors, accounting and internal systems on risk management and corporate governance. Today, according to the survey and the questionnaires done by the agency in 21 Kazakhstani banks, 3 banks, Citibank, Industrial Bank of China, and Odbasi, they apply ESG parameters on issuing the loan. And the Narodny Bank has implemented the international standards, the GRI, and the Sustainable Development Report is published annually. ESG credits and loans in August of current year, it was about 2.6 trillion tenge. During the third stage, ESG risks will be integrated in the surveillance system. Monitoring of ESG risks will be done within the framework of annual surveillance according to the bank system. And within this supervisory aspect, the stress testing has been done by the regulators, and we plan to have the stress testing of climate risks for the banks within the frameworks of the this stress testing starting since 2024. And the methodology and scenario stress test tool will be designed in 2023, and its basis will be as a startup point. 6 scenarios will be taken as International Association of Central Banks and Financial Regulators have designed NJSC. Distinguished colleagues, we really hope that this work of regulators, financial institutions, businesses will help to mobilize the investment flows to achieve our common aim to provide the sustainable development of economy. Please let me wish you fruitful work, successful and fruitful work of this forum. We have invited large conference with the participation of world stakeholders. I would like also to mention that on behalf of the government, during this work, we will have the Minister of National Economy that will join us a little bit later. Plus, we are really happy to welcome here our distinguished guest, Mr. Segentayev, who is the Minister in charge of Economy and Financial Policy of the Eurasian Economic Commissions. And as you know, we are working within the frameworks of the concept and having the financial market. Big work has been done of EBRD and the Eurasian Economic Union. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Segentayev Bakhujan, the Minister in charge of Economy and Financial Policy of the Eurasian Economic Commission from the Republic of Kazakhstan. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you so much, Ms. Madina. Good morning, dear friends. And today we're here in this hall. And distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me, on behalf of the Eurasian Economic Commission, to welcome you all being here and to express the gratitude to organizers of this conference to have an opportunity to participate at this event. It's not a secret that economy is the basis of the welfare of the society, and what kind of economical model we choose, the perspective of the social development and welfare of each person depends on that. In modern world, we identify red, green, and blue economy. In the red economy, the preference is given to the mass production, and the resources of the environment are not considered to be limited. Green economy is based on the respect to the environment and the resource efficiency. The blue is devoted to the sustainable development on industries connected to the resources of the world, ocean, and the regeneration of economy according to the logics. And the actual questions of sustainable development inform the green economy, which is really demanded even in the terms of the global crisis events that we observed this year. I'm sure that no matter on turbulence, this agenda is not behind. The terms and conditions are changing. Such problems as the global warming, the food crisis, social inequality, it has not disappeared. It's just being even more actual. These are the challenges that government, business, and society really faces. And Almaty platform, here we discuss these actual topics and the practical interest is shown to form the green economy from the position of Kazakhstan. This interest was shown in Samarkand at the summit of the Turkic organization. So where the president, Mr. Tokayev, has spread this initiative at the International Financial Center of Astana, the Council of Green Turk Finances, taken into consideration the experience of the AIFC and to provide the responsibilities and obligations on the Secretariat. Business is motivated and interested to participate from the side of stakeholders and actively works to be the leader in this sphere of sustainable development. Plus, this growing attention to this regulators' trust and accurate information and methodology of ESG ratings, the world tendency, the global growth of financial tools of sustainable development, such as green bonds, ESG loans, and funds of the responsible investing. Stimulating, motivating the green investments, it provides the competitive advantage to decrease the necessity to use the resources, getting the additional benefits, utilization of the waste, and increasing the quality of the products, and demands on that because of its ecology. The concept of a green economy is a strategical priority of the governments of many countries. In France, they have adopted the law on transformation and energy to the green growth, the laws on biodiversity growth, landscape, and the green treasury bonds in sphere of social responsible investment. In Germany, the governmental support of green projects by means of the privileged loaning and subsidies to increase the energy efficiency of the industrial guarantees. In Netherlands, government and the stakeholders, they have the energy agreement for the sustainable growth, the National Fund on energy efficiency of the resources according to privileged rates, so the owners can get in order to achieve increase the energy efficiency. In Great Britain, there are upscale plans to transfer to the green economy, and in Great Britain, the law was adopted on climate change. The measures are being established to the sustainable adaptation to the climate changes, stimulating the investments of private sector into green infrastructural projects. The issue of green bonds has been expanded, especially in China and other countries of BRICS, and Chinese market of green bonds will be the largest one in the world, it is expected. The companies that have started working in the eastern direction, they mentioned that the local contingents have gone really a step ahead of the countries are implemented the green financing practices. So the Eastern Fund exchange to ESG aspects and disclosure of non-financial information are even stricter than in the West, and the regulatory field of sustainable development has been improved in many countries. In European Union, as a mechanism of realization of green deals, the Commission in December 2019, they have implemented the cross-border carbon regulations. So that is as a challenge and a risk at the same time. Within the framework of this initiative, European Union plans to decrease the green gas emissions 55% less. They plan to get this result and to turn the Europe into the first carbon neutral continent by 2050. Probably some additions, amendments can be done because we have some new global conditions on the stage. Financial sector is considered by European Commission as the key approach and using the financial stimuli to reorient to sustainable technologies which will lead to the low carbon economy. In countries of Asia, we have the carbon regulations being implemented, which is the mirror reflection on European regulation in this sphere. Many Asian companies are the exporters, and the existence of its regulation, the additional requirements to the import from Europe. When it comes to Eurasian space, unfortunately, we're a little bit we are just in the beginning. We're making the first steps. The heads of the European Union, they made the agreement on economical collaboration within the frameworks of the climate agenda, strategic development of Eurasian economic integration up to 2025. There is the list of measures of economical collaboration in the sphere of green technologies and protecting the environment. At the moment, we're working on realization of the roadmap within the frameworks of this economy agenda and working on the concept and implementing the principles of a green economy. I'd like to emphasize that those countries in the Eurasian Economic Union, they are trying to realize the steps to green finance and implementing new tools in this sphere, and especially more advanced are the Kazakhstan and Russia. In the Republic of Kazakhstan, the Agency on Regulating and Development of Financial Market, and they apply active measures to implement green investments. Kazakhstan could go from the step of forming the legislative base and green taxonomy to realize large investment projects, what Ms. Madina has mentioned before me. In Russia, Central Bank has issued the document where they have identified the intentions to develop the green obligations and bonds, green mortgage and adaptation to climate risks. The possibility of having the green social bonds according to the standards regarding the emissions, and the Moscow Exchange, they have this system which is devoted to finance the projects in sphere of ecology, protection of the environment, and the socially meaningful objects. Armenia, the Republic of Armenia, where agriculture is one of the most important directions of the economy development, the sectors face the consequences of climate change, climate agricultural insurance. Belarus, at the market of the bank terms, conditions, they have the steps to insurance and the green financial investment with the support of the International Financial Corporation. This program has been stopped because of the well-known conditions. The green transformation of the European Union will help to transfer to the new technological contribution and economies of the EU to the trajectory of the low carbon and sustainable development with a low level of green gas emissions and new ecological and industrial technological aspects to be used. And the ecological transformation of the economy is the stimuli to motivate the participants to keep and save the ecosystem and environment. The sustainable development of green finance, and it requires the complex and comprehensive approach. We need to think today about the preparation and working on the new regulatory basis to implement the tools on green finance and sustainable development in the Eurasian area. Eurasian Commission is ready to cooperate with all stakeholders and interested parties. ESG agenda, the territory of Eurasia, is ready to provide the platform for the discussions and promoting these actual questions. Before, I have already mentioned that some documents within the frameworks of our Commission and Eurasian Economic Union, we have adopted something, and we are saying that we have some kind of roadmap already. But frankly speaking, during half a year, I have been working this commission. We have never discussed this question. We are discussing everything every day, but every Tuesday we have the meeting and we have different discussions, but we have never ever had this on our agenda that we're coming back to this topic, though it was clearly monitored each item of the strategy that was adopted some time ago. And each item must be fulfilled by 2025. And when I got the invitation to participate at this conference, we have started to reconsider it again. But that topic that we need to work on it, it's amazing that today Kazakhstan is a leader, goes step ahead of it, and I visit our 5 countries and I participate in different forums and conferences. But such agenda like we have here today, which is actual and important not only in Kazakhstan, but not only within the frameworks of Eurasian Economic Union, but all over the world, it's important. It's been discussed just here, so it shows the level of country development. I congratulate you all that today we're here and we're discussing openly and transparently all these challenges that we have here. And I wish you all fruitful work today during today's conference. Thank you for your time and attention. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Bakhajan, for your time and participation in this conference. Now, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Irina, the first deputy of the chair of the Council of the Association of Legal Entities, Association of Financiers of Kazakhstan. Good morning. Dear colleagues, participants on the conference, on behalf of the Association of Financiers of Kazakhstan, I would like to welcome you here in this forum, speaking about the realization of the sustainable development of the financial market. I would like to mention the importance of this agenda for financial sector. And even this the session, certain session, and during the previous Congress of Financiers, and with different deep topics and the wide and expanded representatives of the state authorities and participation financial sector and distinguished guests. As you know, the organization UNO in 2015, it was identified 17 sustainable development goals, and despite the economical agenda providing the health and the welfare of all people, no matter the age, the high quality education, innovation, infrastructure, the judicial system, and the legal institutions, and economical growth, and etc. All these 17 goals are combined in three components of ESG: geopolitical, macroeconomical events of this year has changed the situation regarding all directions, the clean energy and the dependence of the countries on carbon sources, and the availability of the nutrition and food because of the logistics changes, and quality of life of people, and the needed migration and the access to the healthcare aspects. Because of all the changes, the transfer to carbon neutrality will not be that direct and speed up, but it will be consecutive, maybe a little bit slower than was expected. As a result, the important part, as a result of all the problems and challenges of the growth of sustainable development of the economy and the events, global events, and its impact on Kazakhstan. Of course, the conductor of this new agenda take into consideration the sustainable goals development, the welfare of people, infrastructure development, ecology in our country. The financial sector represents this information and realization of a ESG in financial market. We can consider using two dimensions: the activities of financial institutions and that impact that they can have on economy and the society in general, providing the service and financing the objects and to the sustainable development, motivating and encouraging people to share their ideas. First of all, would like to mention what has been done already by means of the regulators of financial market and financial organizations, speaking about the questions of compliance of this sector with ESG. Of course, improving corporate governance and risk management system. With active participation of financial organizations, the regulators have worked the National Code of the Corporate Governance, which will lead as the orient, as the focus for all companies of the country. The requirements to the corporate governance and systematic risk management financial sector are being improved all the time, as the disclosure of financial, non-financial information of bank activities, the insurance organization, the participants of the securities. The great attention is given to the social responsibility and providing the equal opportunities. And it is obvious that the representation of female in these organizations of financial sector, of the gender equality in financial sector is not a problem. But according to the data of labor source of development, the gender gap in the salary is still not in favor of women. The financial sector, the implementation of new technologies and its implementation, and providing the efficiency, resources usage. Because of financial organizations, our citizens have the access to the digital sources, to financial and the state sources, services. We really hope to have this development going on and inclusion of the faraway regions of Kazakhstan with the problems to the internet access and others, banks and other financial organizations are the key participants of this, the process anti-corruption, money laundering, and terrorism funding, which is the part of the 16th goal of the sustainable development to build up the peaceful and transparent and open society. Because of new financial products for the SME and the digital entrepreneurship, the sector really motivates to solve the 8th goal, the protection of workplaces, supporting small and medium entrepreneurships and the workers of non-official sector. And according to the influence on ESG development goals, we should mention that the main channel of support is, and it will be funding the projects which correspond and in compliance with this ESG. The loans of SME 41% of corporate portfolio of the bank. Speaking about the medium entrepreneurship at 15% of portfolio. When it comes on this industrial support of financial development, the portfolio of the loans, credit portfolio provided to the healthcare industry during 9 months has grown 14%. In education, 35%. In agriculture, 19%. And take into consideration the perspective of the sustainable development, including green financing and the exchange of the sector moves to the maximum fulfillment of its objectives in this sector. Plus, these funding projects have to be, despite the fact of social and economical, it of course must have the importance of sustainability, and then it will matter and the long-term changes in positive way in economy will take place. So we have common tasks on sustainable development. First of all, the consecutive reduction role of the government and the influence on financial sector, increasing the efficiency of the governmental state bodies and providing the transparency of making the decisions and motivating the private sector, providing the sustainable, high-quality workplaces. Second of all, that is the creating of new productions and industries in agriculture, textile, pharmaceutical industry, and other directions where we observe high import dependence. Plus, the investment to the program of human capital in sphere of healthcare and education. Of course, it matters to develop green energy and innovations, technology, and to modernize the infrastructure. Sustainable inclusive growth will lead to the progress, create the workplaces for everyone, and improve the level of life of Kazakhstani people. The active role in realizations of these goals will be given to financial sector, providing the essential resources, having its own transformation, and motivating the clients and society in general to reconsider the strategy and practices to more social, ecologically oriented aspects. And I would like to wish you interest and fruitful collaboration and discussions and partnership in the future. Thank you. Thank you, Irina. Dear participants, today's event will be with online participation of our speakers. Mr. Nicholas Pfaff, Deputy Chief Executive and Head of Sustainable Finance, ICMA, will take the floor online. Mr. Pfaff is the expert with international experience at the international market and principles of ecological, and it is connected to sustainable development of bond obligations, and he is the participant of Eurasian Commission on Sustainable Development. Please.
Hello. I will start by thanking Kazakhstan's Agency for the Regulation and Development of the Financial Market for its invitation to speak today. I'm very pleased to help introduce this important international conference, which will be exploring the role of sustainability considerations from both the financing and investment perspective. ICMA is the International Trade Association for participants in the international bond markets. Our membership of over 600 organizations in 65 countries includes, among other, issuers, investors, intermediaries, and market infrastructure providers. We enable the creation of internationally accepted market standards in our core areas primary markets, secondary markets, repo and collateral markets, and very importantly, in sustainable finance, which is relevant to all of these markets. Sustainability is indeed increasingly integral to everything we do. We are privileged at ICMA to be the stewards of the global standards for green, social, sustainability, and sustainability-linked bonds, collectively referred to as sustainable bonds, that are referenced by more than 97% of international issuance in this segment. These standards have been developed with the input of a wide market initiative of more than 400 organizations and stakeholders under the auspices of the Executive Committee of the Principles, supported by ICMA and currently chaired by the EBRD. The Principles provide the global issuance standard for a market reaching $3 trillion in stock, representing the largest source of market finance dedicated to sustainability and climate transition available internationally to corporates, banks, and sovereigns. The standards and guidance from the Principles are developed with the input and initiative of over 400 market participants and stakeholders, as well as with the participation of many other organizations through technical working groups. The backdrop of our work with the Principles is one of increasing regulation in key jurisdictions. This has taken the form in Europe and Asia and internationally of the development of official taxonomies to provide classifications for sustainability, as well as of official guidance and even standards for sustainable bond labels. ICMA is deeply engaged with these regulatory discussions, both in Europe and in Asia. Our priority is always to ensure as much as possible complementarity with our market-based guidance. More broadly, the common objective of our support for the Principles and our regulatory work is to promote transparency and integrity in the sustainable bond market, while aiming to explain and protect the key characteristics that have made its success to date. If I were to try to define these success criteria, I would say that the market has been global from the outset, inclusive when defining sustainability, and both incremental and aspirational when setting its targets. We will continue to argue and act in support of this philosophy. The Principles provided a new and updated guidance on June 28th at its annual conference hosted by the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development in London. These were mainly, firstly, new definitions for green securitization, namely for secured green collateral bonds and for secured green standard bonds, clarifying terminology and market practice, notably for collateral. A related Q&A has also been released, and similar guidance is also available for social bond securitization. Secondly, an updated registry of approximately 300 key performance indicators for sustainability-linked bonds, the fastest growing segment of the sustainable bond market. The KPIs are classified by sector and between core and secondary indicators, following the input of over 90 leading market participants and stakeholders. An accompanying Q&A addresses, among other issues, the materiality assessment of KPIs, which has been a topic of debate among market participants and stakeholders. Finally, a new climate transition finance methodologies registry has been created with a list of tools to specifically help issuers, investors, and financial intermediaries validate their emission reduction trajectories or pathways as science-based. Similarly, the guidelines for external reviews have been updated to facilitate the assessment of alignment with the existing climate transition finance handbook. It's otherwise important to note that building on the Principles, ICMA is increasingly providing guidance for other important debt markets. We indeed published in October this year initial guidance on how the repo markets can contribute to sustainability. We have also put together a very wide working group that is focused on sustainability in relation to commercial paper financing. I'll finish here and wish everyone a very good conference. Thank you. Hello.
We would like to express the gratitude to Mr. Pfaff and participation of him in this conference, and we would like to start our first session, ESG Agenda of the Future. I would like our participants to proceed and take the place at the panel. Dear participants of the conference, today at this panel session, ESG, the agenda of the future, we have outstanding speakers, defining the key agenda in their sectors and in their regions. I would like to introduce our participants today during the session. Mr. Daniel Shepard is with us. He is ESG manager for Middle East, Central Asia, and Turkey. That's the new position in IFC. Again, on Middle East, Central Asia, and Turkey in IFC. And also, I would like to welcome Aidai Kurmanova, who is the head of the UN Environmental Program Sub-Regional Office for Central Asia. And Mr. Huseyin Ozhan, the director for Kazakhstan, EBRD. And Olzhas Agabekov, chairman of the management board of the International Green Technologies and Investment Project Center. Today, we would like to listen to your opinions on the global trends in finance and sustainable development projects, what kind of practices, best practices in the field can be used of disclosure, and what is the potential on green and sustainable bonds. Mr. Shepard, according to the UN Conference on Trade, UNCTAD, and to achieve the sustainable goals, $7 trillion will be required, USD dollars per annum. And the investment are required not just to get to the renewable sources, but also the investment in labor sources, expanding the social protection, the quality, high-quality education, digitalization provision, the growth through ESG investment. That is an opportunity for developing markets to have the expanded and mature ecosystem for sustainable financing. The whole terminology and like climate business has appeared, given an opportunity to the private capital to participate in the ESG agenda. Mr. Shepard, as a representative of the Global Investment Institute, how investors can have the active role in forming the global and regional developments to have the sustainable green economy? My second question to you, you know that in 2021, we have become the members of the Sustainable Banking and Finance Network, international platform for knowledge exchange and capacity building and sustainable development for regulators of financial market. Could you please elaborate on that, how this initiative can help to have this national systems creating of sustainable finance? And thank you. The floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation, for being here today. It's wonderful to be here in Almaty with all of you. As indicated, I'm the manager for our ESG group within IFC, based in Istanbul, covering the Middle East, Central Asia, and Turkiye region. I mentioned, I think one aspect of my own pathway has been working across different regions. So I'm new to this Middle East and Central Asia region, previously being based in Johannesburg and working across the Africa region, and prior to that in Peru. I'm mentioning that because I'm going to bring some examples to light based on my own pathway and some of those country experiences. The reality is, ESG has moved from being an alternative area to becoming mainstream, and that's been over the last decade. We've seen tremendous changes and strides in this particular area. I look at my own, again, pathway. 10 years ago, when I was living in Lima, Peru, that was the start of the Peruvian's government's involvement in the SBFN, and that really was at a point where it was spending tremendous amount of resources and time focused on gaining attention. The reality is that's moved from gaining attention to real traction and to real measures. When we look at ESG, it's about building resilience, managing risks, and safeguarding our collective future. This is a critical pathway now more than ever. I think for us, when I look at this juxtapose of investors on the one hand and how companies are performing, it can be mutually reinforcing, and I'll get to that as part of my comments. In general, good ESG practices addresses the company's environmental impacts and risks, both from climate events and natural disaster. Now more than ever, again, it's a reality that we're living in. If we look at the floods, the natural disasters in Pakistan that occurred a few months ago, and we look at the floods that occurred in South Africa where I was living before, this is a reality that we need to confront. Assessing ESG risks allows companies to track customer preferences. This can be a part of conscious consumerism. It can help them adopt low-cost, reliable, clean energy practices. And this can also reduce vulnerability to shifting energy policies, giving companies the flexibility and resilience to adapt in turbulent times. Again, turbulent times is something we see every day. As our own experience as an investor, we have learned very well that good ESG practices help companies boost their reputation, reduce costs, and strengthen stakeholder relations. What we've seen is companies that have strong ESG practices outperform their counterparts. We ourselves did a review of close to 700 companies that are in our portfolio, and we found that those companies that have good ESG practices outperform their counterparts. In some cases, this is resulting in a 200% basis point increase in return on equity. That's good business. So investors can play a catalytic role in seeking out companies that incorporate ESG practices. For ourselves, for IFC, ESG is a central pillar of our investments, again, to manage risk and foster a greener future. If we look at the market for sustainability-linked loans and bonds, these were the fastest growing themes within the ESG fixed income market in 2021, on their own growing around to a market of about $500 billion, which is 4 times the volume offered in 2020. If we look at climate in particular, which was a theme already mentioned by previous speakers, we see climate business as a possibility of being a $23 trillion market, trillion with a T, creating some 200 million or more cumulative jobs, and achieving more than 4 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions. So a key part about our job and our work is helping clients tap into these opportunities and working with partners to catalyze finance for climate action as a core piece of our business. We're very proud of our ongoing collaboration with the agency here in Kazakhstan and the joint development of ESG standards and the development of sustainable green financing here in Kazakhstan. Together with the agency, we have been working with a team of international and regional experts to develop the ESG disclosure and ESG risk management guidelines for financial institutions. These documents will give impetus to the development of a sustainable finance framework here in Kazakhstan and will help drive the integration of ESG practices into business models, risk management system, and investment decision-making processes of financial institutions and institutional investors. Last week, I was in Karachi, where we launched the Environmental and Social Risk Management Manual, and we see a similar pathway here in Kazakhstan. This is a growing trend, and we want to be front and central in terms of support to the different countries. Here in Kazakhstan, IFC previously provided technical support to the Kazakhstan Stock Exchange, which is here with us today, in enhancing the ESG reporting methodology, and contributed to the National Corporate Governance Council Task Force in developing the Kazakhstan Corporate Governance Code and National Corporate Governance and ESG standards. IFC itself systematically builds up knowledge and experience and creates its own standards and methodology, which have been recognized as global benchmarks for global corporate governance and ENS risk management in the private sector. Among others are the Equator Principles, which have been a well-recognized set of standards globally. I also want to highlight the importance of reporting, disclosure, and transparency, provided that the quality sustainability information is vital for investors, lenders, and issuers to make confident, future-proof decisions that capitalize on ESG's full potential. Regulators will continue to play an essential role in guiding the market on material ESG topics that should be addressed through such disclosures. At IFC, we contributed to these broader efforts to enhance disclosure and transparency in the markets in which we operate through Beyond the Balance Sheet Disclosure and Transparency Program and our collaboration agreement with the United Nations Sustainable Stock Exchanges, UNSSE. Through the partnership with the UNSSE, in the last year we conducted climate-related disclosure workshops in more than 40 markets, reaching more than 12,000 companies worldwide. I myself joined one of those in Amman, Jordan, that we had a couple of months ago. And it was fantastic to see how the different companies are embracing this approach. ESG is a long-term investment that should be at the top of all of our agendas to navigate the current crises and create a greener, more resilient, and more inclusive world. We at the IFC remain committed to supporting regulators in the private sector in navigating these major trends and positioning emerging markets to tap into the opportunities of sustainable finance in an inclusive way. This means helping all market participants and stakeholders to be an integral part of this journey. Thank you.
Very much. Would like to turn to our next speaker, Mr. Huseyin Ozhan, the director of EBRD office in Kazakhstan. EBRD facilitates development of sustainable economy in our region. You're also actively implementing such reforms in Central and Eastern Europe, North Africa, and the key role is given to a private sector. Today, we estimate, according to your estimates, the portfolio of green projects of EBRD reached 15 billion euros, and by 2025, EBRD announced that it plans to become a green bank. Could you share a little bit your views on how we could facilitate and speed up the agenda of sustainable development in our region, and also how you plan to bring all the activities and operations of EBRD in line with your announced goal of becoming a green bank?
Thank you, Ms. Abylkassymova. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here to join you today in this panel discussion. And I'd like to express my sincere gratitude for the invitation to all organizers. You're absolutely right. We have the goal to become a green bank by 2025, meaning that we would like to invest more than half of our investments across the green agenda. And as of the 1st of January, all our projects we're going to be fully Paris aligned as well across all our projects. And we were also the first ones that started the TCFD. Actually, just 2 weeks ago, we have published our third TCFD report on the 4th of November. Looking at the overall global trends, how I would like to answer your question is that I'll try to look at the global trends, and then we'll try to focus on EBRD region and more on the Central Asia side. Then I'd like to also focus on more on the financial sector, and we'll try to give a few numbers and data on the sustainable bonds. Then finally, as the third point, I'd like to provide what EBRD is doing across our countries of operation, also across Central Asia. Needless to say, we have always been a committed partner to Kazakhstan and other countries in Central Asia, and we continue supporting our countries' ambitions to transform their economies to low carbon and resilient models. Together, we share a vision for transforming the global economy to net zero by creating sustainability culture, by nurturing leadership and sharing knowledge. While the ESG agenda is gaining traction in Central Asia, there is no doubt that it is growing threat of climate change, which will define this century and its generation more dynamically than any others. What should give us hope is that the global leadership from the public and private sectors seems to share this sense of urgency, as it has been seen also recently at COP27. On this challenge and a growing realization that it is within our power to take action, and we should continue taking action. The countries in Central Asia are particularly vulnerable to the climate change. As it was also explained, the average increase in temperatures is actually twice as much across Central Asia than the overall 1.2 centigrades. Mobilizing climate finance is a key element of the Multilateral Development Bank's commitment to align our activities with the objectives of the Paris Agreement. Between 2014 and 2020, all of the MDBs have jointly committed more than $257 billion to climate finance, and of which $186 billion was directed at low and middle-income economies. In view of the global reach of the large pool of capital they preside over, the MDBs have embraced the responsibility to address this finance gap for climate mitigation and adaptation by allocating capital and steering financial flows towards low carbon and climate resilient activities. The aim is that this finance will catalyze the much bigger financial flows managed by the private sector and the low emission and climate resilient investments in emerging markets. This is an area where EBRD has predominantly operating. The global financial market participants certainly observe increasing pressure from the regulators, from the rating agencies, and also investors towards transformative changes in the business models and an organizational level as well. It is no longer enough to allocate a share of investments to green projects. For policymakers as well and investors alike, it is about credible transition towards low carbon and climate resilient operations. Just 2 weeks ago, European Central Bank has released their assessment on how the banks in Europe are progressing towards supervisory expectations in relation to climate and ESG risk, and redirection of their financing streams towards green agenda. It has been also indicated by my colleague Dan as well that this study also provides 186 banks with a total combined assets of 25 trillion euros. There's a broad acknowledgement within the banking sector that the transition risks within the current business horizon is recognized and also mostly mitigated. Based on the institution's own assessments, the review shows that more than 80% of the institutions conclude that the risks have material impact on their risk profile and strategy, and 70% seeing material risk within their business horizon 3 to 5 years. Most institutions have now devised an institutional architecture to address climate-related risks, having clearly built up their capacities compared to 2022 and 2021. Over 85% of institutions now have at least basic practices in place for most of the basic practices in place for most of the areas addressed by these expectations. This is particularly important for Central Asian countries to see where the direction of travel should be and will be, especially on the financial sectors. All financial institutions are part of the global ecosystem, of course. And while the EU might seem far away from Central Asia, the impact of these transformative changes and disclosure requirements in EU banks are starting to impact all of the FIs in Kazakhstan and in Central Asia as a whole. So we strongly believe in the walking the talk. As I mentioned previously, we were the first MDB to become the supporter of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, the TCFD. And it is important that all of the financial institutions would start looking at the risks and these disclosures and reporting requirements. Now I'd like to turn over to the green and sustainable bonds and overall responsible investments. So the sustainable bonds, it was also briefly touched by the previous speakers, that it's on the green side, the social side, and the sustainability in general. And also there's the new sustainable linked bonds as well. So sustainable bond issuances reached 0.6 trillion in the first three quarters of this year, and with green bonds remaining the dominant one with more than 50% of the total issues. And social bonds around 15% and sustainability linked bonds around 10%. And the sustainability bonds overall is around 22% of the total issuances. When we look at the currency of the issues, 41% are in euros, 32% in USD, 8% in yuan, and around 2% or so in GBP and other currencies. Throughout the EU and the EBRD region, the social bond issuances significantly increased during the past 5-year period, with the market more than tripling in terms of the amount issued and also with a compounding CAGR of roughly 46%. Such trend was further reinforced also this year, where 250 billion of the social bonds were issued compared to the full year last year, which was around 266 million. The issuances from the public entities continue to dominate, representing close to 70% of the market, and followed by the financial institutions and followed by corporate issuances. Comparatively, more mature green bond market dominates overall social bond issuances, around 50% again in 2021. When we look at the EBRD region, where is 38 countries, the total social bond issuances amount to around increases around 50% CAGR, and further expanded by 68% in 2021, reaching to 7.5 billion euros. Again, public entities are definitely in the leading, almost 75%, and also financial institutions are representing 27% of the shares. So far, in EBRD countries of operations, only 8 sustainable bonds with social use of proceeds have been issued by private issuers, 7 sustainability bonds and 1 social bond. These private issuers of the social bonds or the sustainability bonds with social use of proceeds were all financial institutions. No corporate issues yet across all of our countries of operation. So EBRD Green Bonds Technical Cooperation Program, we recently established this technical cooperation program. We work with the countries and with the relevant authorities in these countries to provide the necessary technical cooperation to support the gap analysis and defining the criteria, and also later on invest and take a chunk of investment in these issuances. Finally, I would like to talk a little bit about our own green agenda across the EBRD and with our policy and operations. We have been promoting, of course, the environmentally sound and sustainable development in investment and technical cooperations activities since our inception of our operations. But more importantly, under our green economy transition approach in between 21 and 25, we committed to becoming a majority green bank by 2025 and signing all of our operations with the goal of the Paris Agreement as of the 1st of January 2023, so 3 months away. I'm comfortable to say that all of the operations that we signed this year in Kazakhstan is aligned with Paris Agreement. And we are hoping to sign in Kazakhstan again, more than 50% of all of our projects this year is going to be towards green agenda. In terms of policy development, we define the green as a key component, and also this year we have our new country strategy for Kazakhstan, and not only for Kazakhstan, but for all of our countries of operation, and with a focus on Central Asia. Green is our #1 priority, together with increased competitiveness. So in the 36 economies where we invest, we are facing real-life dilemmas, of course, and while we try to help economies become greener, more resilient and inclusive. Over the last few years, our regions also faced the big problems from COVID, energy security, and real-life disasters as part of the physical climate risks. And there is our immediate response is, of course, focused on the vital and urgent support that people and businesses need in these times. So just would like to give a few examples across the region. So in Kazakhstan, we're working very closely with the government on the identification and the approval of the long-term strategy, together with, of course, other MDBs and other institutions as well. And also, we're working very closely with Ministry of Energy on identifying the low-carbon pathway, especially for the renewable energy and renewable energy integration. Scaling up the renewable sources is extremely, particularly wind is important, and of course, enhancing the electricity grid. In Uzbekistan, together with the Uzbek Ministry of Energy, we're jointly developing a long-term Paris-aligned 2050 carbon neutrality roadmap, which focuses on deployment of renewable energy as well, and determines the target of low-carbon technologies into transition into zero. Again, in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, we are cooperating with all other MDBs, engaging in financial regulators to promote the ESG disclosures and climate risk management. In Kyrgyz Republic, we're providing support to the government to access climate finance. We helped them to establish the Climate Finance Center in 2017, and in early 2022, we're supporting them with a project preparation facility under the Climate Finance Center. So transformational change is important, and as EBRD, we're trying to do this via our green investments and the overall policy engagement. I've taken too much time, so I'll stop here for the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Я бы хотела предоставить...
I would like to give the floor to Aidai Kurmanova, head of the UN Environment Program's Aboriginal Office for Central Asia. It is the very important organization, and it is the leader. The aims and targets for ESG are established in this direction. Could you please tell us what is being done within this strategy in our region, what had been realized, and what do you plan to realize more? Thank you so much, Ms. Abylkassymova. Good morning, everybody. My name is Aidai Kurmanova, and I am the head of the UN Environment Program's Aboriginal Office for Central Asia. Our office is new. In 2016, it was established and launched. The Kazakhstani government has provided Almaty Hub as the office for our sub-regional office, and we work for all countries, and as previous speakers have mentioned about climate change and reduction of water resources amount and degrading lands and the lack of biodiversity and all this ecological mandate that the UN program works. And everybody thinks that it's not about economy, it's not about business, it does not have, it has nothing to do with this, but the main driver here I would like to mention with the reduction and stoppage, how to stop the scary changes that we have to live in future for all of us. Of course, business is the trigger and driver for all these positive changes in future. And I would like to mention we have the gap between the communication of our UN agencies, our NGOs, and all ecological agenda and what we are talking on green economy. We are doing lots of things on green economy, and with communication and integration of all our collaborative mutual activities. When we are talking and discussing UNO program, that is about Ministry of Ecology. You know the main stakeholders are the state authorities and the Ministry of Ecology, Ministry of Economy. They are our main focal points. But there must be great coordination with Ministry of Finance and others who coordinate the state budget, which I will tell you a little bit later about. There was the analysis for the ecological study that was done by some ecological agencies, the Ecological Commission of UNO, UNEP, and another partnership organization. And we will have this ecological. We have done this ecological studies, and we've done it for Uzbekistan. And this year we are about to start to do it for Tajikistan. And about 90% of recommendations from each sector, from each part of it, speaking about governance, water, green economy, energy efficiency, about 90% of these recommendations come to all this interdisciplinary coordination, basically, when it comes to the realization of this ecological agenda. And we would like to mention that business is the key player when it comes to the changes, climate improvement, and creating the green workplaces and sustainable consumption. And we need to understand that it comes to business and we meet everybody except business. So I would like to mention that business has started to promote its initiatives, and they have started taking these obligations and responsibilities on them. Speaking about ecological agenda, I would like to mention that there is the same flow, the same movement that actually create these regulatory norms and conditions for work and conditions of the market. And today's topic is truly important in this collaboration, mutual cooperation, and providing all opportunities and possible tools, financial tools, in order to promote their ecological agenda. Also, I would like to say that our mission on promoting the partnership and all this inspiration and providing this awareness, best practices, technical expertise, and we know that this green of making it green, we understand it's not cheap, it's not fast, but we do not have any other way, basically. And in any case, eventually we will come to this, that when this green agenda, ecological agenda of our activities, our life, of each aspect of our life, will be ecological in any case, because the resources are not renewable, basically, are not being recovered, and it's been degraded, and air that we breathe in is really dirty. Air pollution is terrible. So what's the connection? But again, that is the sustainable production and manufacture. No filters, for example. We do not have that systematic approach to understanding and realizing that if we do not see how dirty that is, and we breathe in this dirty air and we eat not healthy food, we cannot see it with our eyes. But years later, we will realize it by means of the healthcare system and state budget. Again, we'll have to provide 60-70% of its state budget to allocate to not for preventive measures, but to struggle with the consequences of all these activities. So we would like to mention also that last year there was Stop Call 50 when all countries of the world got together in Stockholm. and it was mentioned, we are discussing this ecological agenda. All of us, we are talking about this, but we would like to have more practical steps. And it was announced that it is really extremely important to draw the attention of banks and financial institutions to this problematic issues. To say that nothing is being done, it's not true. Lots of things are being done, and great shift we can observe. And then Central Asian region, we can see first pioneers, first amazing cases, and you can observe what's happening in the country here in Kazakhstan and other countries of Central Asia. And we would like to emphasize good initiatives and Central Asian region does not attract that much of attention, but the time has come. We need to have some sort of the block and powerful countries, and it's not a secret that neighbors are looking at each other. And if in some country we have the successful case, it should be the trigger, the driver for others to copy it and to try to do the same. And of course, we understand that economical development of the countries, it's different, and we should take it into consideration. Then knowledge exchange, experience exchange, this regional partnership in different questions should be the driver. And I would like to give an example. Last year, we were trying with Ecological Center, National Center, to provide a sub-regional Central Asian speech to set it up at this conference. As you know, at this global platform, we have groups of countries, African countries, Pacific region, and Central Asian countries. We cannot be combined in one block. We are somewhere those mountainous countries, but we are somewhere separately with some countries of Europe and Central Asia. Someone includes Afghanistan there, but we do not have our own specific, like comprehensive strategical regional partnership and cooperation. And as partners, as a UNO organization, we really hope to have this leadership approach for some countries of Central Asia and to take this leadership position to show the best cases and to pull Central Asian region to the global platform. And believe me, that will be enough of buildings, access to finances, and access to different sources of some maybe additional even trainings, even simply speaking best technologies, and etc. I have 2 more minutes, and I would like to say that in Central Asia, we have started the program, launched the program Global Possibilities for ESG, for Sustainable Market, and there are several components. We're working with NGO, tourism sector, with the state authorities. That's about plastic and knowledge. They work with universities on implementing sustainable university life. You will not believe how important that is to work with youth when they integrate in their curriculum, they integrate these aspects of ecological education. It will be amazing, and the outcome will be perfect later on in future. In this context, I would like to mention that there is a problem of access of SME to green finances. So I would like to draw your attention to this aspect, and we have done very quick analytical pilot study, and we have identified the needs of SME here in Kazakhstan to the products of green financing. And in this research, we have asked to identify the sectors of economy with a great performance, and maybe processing, maybe recycling, maybe agriculture, which can actually have the impact long-term influence on ecology and creating the workplaces. Maybe not now, but later on. And as Irina has mentioned, 31% in credit portfolio in the bank, that is SME. That is a just tremendous number. And according to the reports of the World Bank, something like about 50% or even more business is being done by SME. And it is clear picture that SME really needs, and it needs to get all these opportunities that they can take and create these green workplaces, ecological standards. Maybe it will be too expensive now, but they will implement it because it becomes necessary and fashionable, and there will be no way at the end if you do the business according to the old aspects and variants. The preliminary outcomes and results were achieved that the barriers, constraints of knowledge. SME, they say that they do not have knowledge, no access to this knowledge. They know just some kind of limited bulk of aspects on green finance, and to provide more information how to do that, what's the approach, and it says that it will lead to the demand and supply. So if there is a supply, then there should be the demand. From the side of financial institutes to provide this knowledge, we need to provide this knowledge, to have this bridge and to make it quicker between these parties and to have this direct collaboration. Plus, they have mentioned that the financial barriers and constraints that do not allow them to do this green finances for SME because of this first capex, which is huge for them, and the risk on investment in green financing, and of course not good conditions for investment. And they said that regulating in sphere of green finance, and very often it happens to be that it cannot be compared, and it's a little bit out of reality, what's happening in reality, and it does not satisfy the specific needs for SME. I just have a very short insight. One more, that last week we visited Astana, and it was nice to say that Ministry of Finance supported the initiative on behalf of the president and with the support of the government of Kazakhstan to implement sustainable state procurement. And state procurement will be green, will be getting green. There will be this ecology aspect implemented and indicators when it comes to state procurements of these goods and services. It will happen, of course, not right away. There was the preliminary analysis, which segment we can take and which goods we can take as pilot for the beginning. And when it comes to some corrections, some additions, so it will not be great impact or influence on economy and business. And this 3 or 4 segments of these goods will be implemented, and the ecological indicators will be implemented in any case when it comes to state procurement. So business will have to follow this policy and to have more ecology-friendly goods. I'm ready to answer the questions if you have questions. I have taken too much of your time, sorry. Thank you. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Olzhas. According to the data of World Bank, in 46 jurisdictions, there are 68 tools which depend on the carbon emissions, and in countries we have the tax on carbon emissions, and the new mechanism of European governments, this cross-border carbon tax for our companies, exporters. They will have to buy the certificate, and the price will be the same for local producers, and the price will go up. Because of this, what kind of measures should be taken by Kazakhstani importers, and what are the plans on investment and modernization of the manufacture? Thank you so much for your question. First of all, welcome, and I would like to express the gratitude. Thank you, organizers, for this important discussion and development of the ESG agenda. Today we have talked a lot about the world pressure trends, upcoming trends that have the impact on carbon economy, developing markets, and including different developed countries which announce about long-term goals on achieving the carbon neutrality, and they have the aims on reduction of greenhouse gases emissions, and to keep up the competition of their own economies. These countries are discussing the application to have this cross-border tax. And this directive, which is relevant to this, is being discussed very actively in EU. And, since 2023, EU will request the reports on exported goods. And since 2026, for some goods of these exported goods, in comparison to benchmarking of EU and those manufacturers, similar manufacturers, it will increase the level of those emissions, and it will be under this carbon regulation at the border. So as I've already mentioned, it will create some kind of tension and pressure on our country because Kazakhstan, despite the fact that share of this greenhouse gases not more than 3% of comparing to the world, but per capita we are in top 10 countries. And when I used to work in Ministry of Ecology, we were monitoring these questions, and it's still being actual with CBOM as well. We should mention that in the beginning, what will be covered, that's scope 1 emissions, the direct emissions during the production. And then in future, probably the indirect emissions will be covered when it comes to the electricity. And as we know, 70% of electricity is connected with the coal burning. And the third cover is the production value, this production chain. When we were monitoring these questions, we can see that the risk of this impact, that aluminum production is under this risk. All other goods, because they're not considered by EU yet as goods that will be, our exported goods that can be under this pressure in upcoming future, it's not the question at the moment. But what should we do now in order to avoid it? First of all, of course, we need to reduce the emissions at the sites and to implement, taking into consideration our energy consumption, then measures, and to reduce the losses when it comes to the transporting of energy and electricity. And of course, institutional measures are important because for business and for commercial sector, for financial sector, it is really important to have, for us and for the country in general, to have the long-term vision where we are going in order to achieve net neutrality, carbon neutrality up to 2060, which sectors are supposed to take this pressure, which measures we should take. And we can see that it is being designed. The strategy is being designed very actively at the moment. In 2021, the Ministry of Ecology, it has been started. The Ministry of National Economy, this work is going on. It's a really complicated document, lots of challenges. And besides, it's important to mention the questions, regulatory aspect, because in this case, the questions of having the fair price for carbon, and it will allow to make it profitable, those projects that will be devoted to reduce this greenhouse gases emissions. All these measures even today are actively designed. Each large company is working in direction of working on the strategy of their internal achievements and approach to this net neutrality. Mr. Ozhan has mentioned that we have a large project next year with Green Fund, Green Climate Fund, where the roadmaps will be designed for a large business, where there will be the cooperation and strategy, not just simple documents, but it will be used. The methods of modeling will be used. It's not really about the content of measures themselves, but their economical efficiency and reasoning. Another important question is about fulfilling the obligations in our banks within the frameworks of Paris Agreement up to 2030. reduction of emissions, 50% of 1990, and the realization of which the work is being done by the government and the Ministry of Ecology in particular in actualization and identifying the national contribution, that document that includes some directions, some measures that we're talking about up to 2030, what will have to be done. Based on our assumptions and the realization, this preparatory work in the realization, having this institutional measures, it should be finished before 2025. By that time, when EU will take this payment for this, our institutional basis should be ready, regulatory basis should be ready, all the calculations should be ready in order for us to identify the rational, correct price, cost of all these reductions per one ton of CO2. One of the initiatives that is being realized today, the opportunity of linking our trade and greenhouse gases with international systems, first of all with a system of EU, and the work is being actively done together with the Office of EU in Astana, and the discussions are going on. We have preliminary recommendations that were given, what our system should work on, what should be changed, speaking about technical aspects, and the same as the political ones. And in this context of today's discussion, speaking about ESG, of course, it will be very important and decision-making aspect that all those companies, when they will implement all these measures, they will have to report on that. So the government and stakeholders and commercial sector will be able to monitor in which extent these or that authority or stakeholder player within the framework of this agenda, if they comply and correspond to those requirements and policies that are being promoted by the whole world and by our country as well. Again, I would like to emphasize, we've said a lot about green taxonomy. We would like to disclosure the information that probably it will be one of the tools for realization within the frameworks as abbreviation. That will be this within the letter A. It's a classificator of projects, specific projects and directions, some specific indicators that we'll have to come to, and investment projects will have to come to in case of realization of those. And today, this green taxonomy is for subjects of SME, and we understand the necessity to expand the application of this tool for large business as well. And as Center of Green Technologies, we are keeping an eye on that, and on an annual basis, we try to fill it in, and we invite all the interested parties to expand this direction, as tools of subsidizing some investment and deposits and projects themselves. And in conclusion, I would like to mention, Ms. Madina, we as a Green Technology Center, one of the directions for us is to have the guidelines for the available technologies in correspondence to the ecological code. We are working on 16 manuals, guidelines on these technologies, and in accordance with Eco Code since 2025, top 50 polluters together having the impact of 85% of pollution in our country. We provide an opportunity to have this transformation on a voluntarily basis, so that we will free, in accordance of the tax code, no rate of this payment to the environment, and this means can be invested into the realization of these objectives of the green transformation. And we have great expertise here. We collaborate very tightly with all the partners, international partners, local partners, with the industrial sector, financial sector, with associations, And here we would like to offer then within the frameworks, you've mentioned that ESG agenda will be realized according to 3 steps, 3 stages. And during the first step, we would like to offer our support and assistance with the correct understanding of ESG, because nowadays there are lots of opinions on that and lots of ideas and proposals how we will assess it, how we will evaluate it. The green aspect of projects, we do not have the understanding how it's supposed to be done. And based on that expertise and work that we have, we are ready to share it and we're ready to help. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all speakers, and I would like to mention that, of course, if we hadn't accepted the new Eco Code, which had happened 2 years ago, and the new green taxonomy on green projects, probably today there will be nothing to talk about even on this green bonds development, sustainable bond development, and because of this taxonomy that in correspondence to all international standards, it happened and it became actually impossible. This verification question was very acute, and we need to verify those money. Those investors invested this money in green bonds that was really directed to those aims that were announced. And another question, important question, that this verification requires money too. And the companies that actually issue these bonds and that attract this investment that it is required to have this support and assistance. The great support was given Pricewaterhouse, and we get the support from international partners that have provided the finances for this verification. And during this year, in July, at the legal level, we have identified the idea of this verification, and the order and the legal act was adopted, which proves the list of companies that has the right to do this verification. What you're saying, it's really important when it comes to identification, the criterion in order to see the green aspect of the project. This speaker's speeches actually included lots of information, but it was another question that probably we didn't answer, and this is the question for all speakers. Who will pay for this transformation? So, Mr. Shepard, you've mentioned that investors create more and more pressure and tension on companies, and here we have opinion that someday, some moment, that will be for this long-term financing, this access will be closed for the companies with traditional brown economy, and they will not be able to get this access to financing in order to realize their projects. So Kazakhstan, as you know, it has a large resource economy. We have lots of plans on modernization in all spheres. That is mining, oil, and that's the extractions of other metals, and the gold, and other minerals. And we can see that we can see these changes. So, Mr. Shepard, the question to you probably, in which extent you think that the access will be limited for the companies with traditional economy for this financing? And I would like to ask all of you, basically. And the second question, Mr. Huseyin, you've mentioned that EBRD in our region, traditionally speaking, helped to modernize infrastructure. And it comes to everything that comes to utilities, modernization on energy efficiency, realization of other investment projects. So EBRD, that is like private institution in this sphere. And you are always for the development of private sector. But if EBRD becomes a with a green agenda and only green projects will be financed, not all the projects, that it was already mentioned, that not all projects can have criteria of this green aspect. So that's why we got these bonds, which are called, they're not really sustainable, well, some sort of transition bonds, and some bonds that have some kind of let's say, related to sustainable development, because it's impossible to do it right away to have this transfer. So what kind of impact will it have on the limitation of this financing from the side of your institution and in general for the company in our region? Not for companies, but the main, basically, all other household community organizations and entities, the regional local authorities who have the access to this institute. So probably the question is to Ms. Kurmanova. Our countries face, of course, we understand the level of challenges that we face. It's really different. And the countries in our region, so as you've mentioned, yes, the different tempo of implementation of this green agenda. But again, the question comes, who will pay for this transfer? Is it the government, private sector, or it's the international organizations? What kind of role can they play in this? We know that really allocates lots of finances on that, for this transition period, and gives investment and attracts and accumulates the resources from the sides of other investors, other portfolio investors. So again, it comes to the financing. Of course, everybody's interested that development should be sustainable, but there are some limitations in regards of funding. And as you've mentioned about strategy, it is very complex strategy, and it was presented at the High Council, at the government, and it was done in September of this year. The main question, again, the great amount of investment that is required to go to the low-carbon economy. And the government nowadays faces lots of short-term current challenges, and it's required to develop the policy and fund education and healthcare, despite the fact that is the fight with consequences, as Ms. Kurmanova has mentioned. But we have lots of targets and aims, and state budget is limited, and realization of strategy of carbon neutrality must happen by means of the state budget or by means of the companies that will basically put it onto the end users. And we've already observed it when it happens, this growth of prices, and we have modernization of different entities. Of course, it gets onto the shoulders of the end users, on population. So what is planned within the frameworks of the strategy? How should we find the sources of this investment in order not to harm the current tasks and objectives and current needs that the country must provide? So probably, Mr. Shepard, we'll start with you.
Great, thanks very much. I mean, I think in general, when we talk about driving change, there's two, I mean, and to simplify things, there's two mechanisms, there are two approaches. One is the incentives or carrot, and the other is stick. That's really how one can drive change. So when we think about in the context of climate, when we think about in the context of green, this carrot and stick can be an approach. So I look at it through the lens of where there's opportunities. And so when we look at it through financing, there are opportunities to help drive that change in terms of creating incentives. And I'll give some examples at a global level. I mean, as a global institution, we work across many different markets. If we think about how we are encouraging collectively to drive this change in certain markets, we can do that through providing access to funding and more concessional funding. Example of that is when we look at South Africa, for example, which is going through this just transition, this just energy transition, and this move away from coal. There's been a collective effort to mobilize $8.5 billion in finance for the country to go through that transition. So there can be opportunities in terms of looking for the more concessional or softer funding to help drive some of that change. The other reality is what we're trying to really emphasize is a lot of these changes can be done and create more competitiveness and cost reduction. So we look at it through the lens of environment, for example. Driving energy and driving this transition of energy can also be done through energy efficiency, can also be done through alternative mechanisms, can also be done in a way that is cost effective. And I think that's the key thing to drive. I mean, one of the things that I try to emphasize in my talking points is all of this needs to be fundamentally driven by business. And so if we can inherently incorporate cost efficiency, more different mechanisms to be able to reduce overall operational costs, and at the same time look at those opportunities for incentives, that can be the driver of change. And we're seeing that more and more. So encouraging companies to look at it through that lens of how they themselves can incorporate operational efficiency and how they themselves can take advantage of opportunities for incentives, including financing, to help drive this change. And those opportunities are there. The other thing I would add is we as IFC are trying to build or trying to help the building blocks when it comes to sustainable finance. And one of the questions was around the Sustainable Banking and Finance Network, for which IFC is facilitating. The key thing there is to build the in-house capacity and know-how within the country to drive this change. And this is about peer-to-peer learning across different markets. It's about taking experiences in markets that may be a little bit further developed and bringing those opportunities and bringing those experiences to bear with Kazakhstan in this case. And that's one of the things that we on the IFC side as a facilitator of the SBFN are quite keen to do together with the agency. So two things, fundamental, look for those opportunities that can help drive the agenda and really incorporating operational efficiency as a key driver to make sure at the very core of all of this it's being driven by business. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And it is a really good question, who will pay? Because 3 years ago, when you were saying green economy, can you calculate how much will it cost, basically? When we were talking about different conditions of economical growth and development of each country, we are talking about this, that it's not really cheap, but it's not really that expensive. So I have an economical background in my education and a little bit of experience in economy. I can say we have money in economy. We just need to redistribute it and allocate it in a different way and to use it rationally, leaving the old principles and even budget programming and planning inside the government, inside business. Sometimes it happens this way that we're just doing it in an old format, but there are so many different methodologies, different programs on budgeting and different project approaches. We've been looking, and I think we've considered some of the reports. I don't remember the numbers. I can be just really careful with it, but still, even approximately speaking, in average developing countries, as we're saying, with a really low GDP, if we consider with this low economies, I mean the structure of economy when it's not really based on oil and gas, it is simple and understandable, and it's better to transform it. And there was a report that money is inside. And then you can just have this rational, comprehensive approach, efficient approach, transparent approach. It will help. And also, I would like to say that, again, who will pay? Of course, because of our knowledge as UNO, we are not investors, but UNO, which is based and serves for people, for nations, and it exists by means of their financial contributions. We collect the best practices and examples and cases, and we have so many of those when countries can just use it. How it used to be, why it didn't work, okay, we don't need it. And then we can take it and adapt it to some conditions and who was the best, and we can basically use it in our sphere. And at the end, answering your first question, as Olzhas was mentioned, about the requirements on exporting goods, there are some limits. We should be very careful in this. All countries must achieve ESG and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we understand that economy is the fundamental. When we talk about ecology, well, what is it? It's something fashionable. But we do understand that it is business that produces and makes money for the budget, taxes, and that's our life that we are, and that's the business because of which we actually live and exist. And these global platforms should be quite careful when it comes to taxonomy, and all these limitations are being implemented. These countries' importers must be responsible what they implement, and they have limitations, for example, set up, because mostly limitations can be set up, in my opinion, by the developed economies when some kind of a step of the evolution was actually got through. And you want to have this clean services, clean goods. It should be bilateral responsibility by the countries that appear to be the blocs. They must be responsible that other countries would not stay behind, far away behind, because we understand that world economical development is really different and it varies. And in this question, we should always raise this question and draw our attention to this. In our Central Asian region, we have different examples. We have different consultants and experts, and the literacy of the population, business literacy, and the literacy of our government is high enough to understand what we need and how we can use it in a correct way. What should we have, where is the lack, and where to take it. Thank you. Mr. Ozhan?
Ultimately, that is the most important question.
Yes.
Yes. How to finance this. How much time do we have? Very short. Okay.
Yes, we're expecting very short answer.
I should have actually touched upon it. But first clarification. For EBRD, 50% of our investments will be completely on the green side. The other 50% doesn't have to be fully green, but the projects themselves is going to be Paris aligned. So we will continue the infrastructure projects across the board. We will continue with all of our objectives of competitiveness, green, and inclusion. Now, in terms of how to finance it, it is extremely complex question, but 3 important points that I want to talk about. Related to what Olzhas said, also CBAM, and also emission trading system. That is going to be an important mechanism that will create some sources of funding. Of course, government budget is going to be important. Of course, IFIs is going to be important. And finally, it's to make use of all of the international institutions that will provide the necessary grant funding for blended finance. That is going to be important. These are the 4 components. And finally, policy, regulation, financing, and investments needs to work together in a mesh in order to answer this question. But it is a reality. The roadmap is there, and we will have to just walk through. Thank you.
When it comes to your question, Ms. Madina, when it comes to the strategy of other countries, of course, the main, let's say, the horizon for planning and forecasting, it's 10 years, up to 2035. In our case, up to 2030, according to the results of last moderation, we can see that fulfill this aspects. We need, let's say, just average $10 billion, for example, and the launch share of investment is required to the sector of energy. And we understand that that condition, that state of energy sector that we have now, investing back to brown economy, which is, according to the data of Bank Lazar, is coal in capex per 1 megawatt, 5 times more than solar power plant, 10 times than wind, and etc. So it says that, of course, it is more profitable to invest into the renewable sources. But again, who will pay for it, and how is it possible to do? Within the frameworks of Paris Agreement, some mechanisms are prescribed which allow the developing economies to attract for very long-term cheap money to attract the climate green fund, and developing countries took the obligations up to $100 billion to add to provide the support for these developing economies. So thank you. Thank you. We no questions, right? Yes, thank you, distinguished participants of the discussion. Thank you so much for your participation. We would like to stay at the panel session for a little presence and for the photographs.